I'd like to invite your attention to our morning scripture reading. Today's reading comes to us from the Gospel of Mark. You'll find Mark between the Gospel of Matthew, commonly called Matthew, and Luke, commonly called Luke, in that second section of the Bible called the New Testament. Our reading today is found on page 49 in your pew Bible, and if your Bible is on an electronic device or tablet, you'll find it on the same page. As you read the selection, I would like to add a little note in the verse 38. There was little, if any, punctuation in the original Greek text. Every translation of the Bible is, in fact, an interpretation drawn from that original language, and often it's only context that clears or implies how the original text might be translated. Context will tell us that Jesus is warning us about some scribes, not all scribes here, who like to walk around in long robes. So the comma in verse 38 after scribes is unnecessary and misleading. Shame on NRSV. Our reading from Mark chapter 12, verses 38 through 44. As he taught, he said, "Beware the scribes who like to walk around in long robes, and to be greeted with respect in the marketplaces, and to have the best seats in the synagogues and places of honor at banquets. They devour widows' houses, and for the sake of appearance say long prayers. They will receive the greater condemnation." He sat down opposite the treasury and watched the crowd putting money into the treasury. Many rich people put in large sums. A poor widow came and put in 2 small copper coins, which are worth a penny. And he called his disciples and said to them, "Truly I tell you, this poor widow has put in more than all those who are contributing to the treasury. For all of them have contributed out of their abundance. But she, out of her poverty, has put in everything she had, all she had to live on." Blessings on this reading from Holy Scripture this morning. Now I know what you are expecting from this passage, because you probably heard it about this passage before. If only all of us could give as gratefully and as without reserve as the widow in this story gave. May we give it all. Bull. It's like the minister saying, "Hey, we have everything we need for every bit of our budget. There's only one problem. It's all in your wallets." Or better yet, an associate pastor trying to help with the pledge campaign announced boldly, "I've upped my pledge, up yours." Gotta be aware of those associate pastors. They're rascally. But sometimes the best gifts we receive have actually not really cost others all that much. Some of the worst gifts that we can give don't really cost us that much either. Value is always seen in the eye of the giver as well as the receiver. And what is valuable is at the heart of our reading today. First, we have this part about the scribes, some of these scribes that find personal status at relatively little personal cost for them. Others make great personal sacrifice, but never achieve any status, like the widow. And often it's our presumptions about deserving and undeserving, earned or given, that actually are questionable and at times self-deceiving. We do live in a world full of choices that we can make relatively easy with our own comforts, while for others they're simply not possible. Need food? Where are the largest grocery stores in Decatur? Out, away from the center of town. You need a car, or yes, there is bus service out there, but you can go to any store and shop the greatest selection of Kroger or Walmart, as long as you have a car or transportation. Because all those mom and pop stores that you remember as children being just blocks from your house are gone. Where do you go when the buses stop at 7 o'clock at night? And what choices are left in the neighborhood are liquor stores with convenient food, or other liquor stores with convenient food. Now, maybe we're not in the mood for going grocery shopping today. Maybe our kitchen is such a mess that we don't want... You should quit laughing. That we say, I'm not in the mood to cook. Let's go out to eat. There's how many restaurants? I tell you what, in Decatur alone, I have a quick, rich scheme to give you. Just open a new restaurant in Decatur every 6 weeks, because everyone in town will visit it in 6 weeks' time. Then you can close it and open another one. But again, we have the choice to eat maybe a nice meal after service today, or maybe a quick one since we're in a hurry at many of the fine fast food establishments throughout. Some don't. How about vacation time? How many can pick a place in the world and take a little time, take a little money, but we can plan for next year's vacation now? How many have had just years of time off from work, but time spent at home? Let's talk about the big kahuna, medical care. You know, health plans, doctors, hospitals. Some of us have preferences. Some of us adore St. Mary's. Some of us can't stand St. Mary's. Some of us adore Decatur Memorial Hospital. Some of us disdain Decatur Memorial Hospital. But we can choose. Others have this choice. A clinic that might still be open, or the emergency room that is always open. Since we just had an election, I couldn't let this go. Politicians! What choices did we have? Evil or lesser than evil, or instead of evil, Miss Little back there. Wealthy and powerful people can pick people who look like them, talk like them, have the same things as them. Poor people can also choose among the wealthy millionaires and billionaires that are going to represent them in General Assembly, in governors' mansions, and in Congress, and in all those. Do you really think a billionaire knows East Main Street?
Excuse me.
Now, of course there's charity. There's always talk about charity, and the wealthy and the powerful can choose. Well, should I support the American Lung Association, the American Red Cross? What agencies should I support? I'll give you a hint. It should be Dove Incorporated. But the poor and the powerless have only one choice: to either take charity or to try to go without it. Let's talk about these scribes that are described in our reading today. Aren't you so glad that we now live in a place and time where there are no longer any pretentious religious people? Anyone that's not, casting airs about themselves, making a show of it all, absolutely demanding respect. I pay your salary, pastor, in all times, in all places. Feeling that it's rather their God-given right to apparently serve on God's committee, where I recommend these people, but I disdain those people, God. And look at how long I can do a prayer. Aren't you glad we don't have any of those kinds of Christians? Will Rogers once said, I, of course, never met a man I didn't like. Well, Jason's going to say this: I have never met a single pretentious Christian that I can even stand. Because Jesus' warning is timely here and blunt. Those who make a big show about how religious they are often the poorest examples of a lived faith. Period. Have you noticed that the one that talks the most about Jesus in their lives is the very first one who never acts like Jesus in the first place? The one with the most religious memes on the Facebook page, the ones that say, share this if you love Jesus. Scroll down and you are destined to hell for all eternity. Posting Jesus on a page? Check. Attending church? Well, I just can't seem to find that perfect one like I already am. Many people live that empty religious life that is still filled with unrighteousness, that is disguised as righteousness, and selfishness that is merely disguised as generosity. The scribes of Jesus' day were often legal experts in handling estates and properties. Now, don't worry, the pastor isn't going to go to condemn all lawyers here. But scribes had authority to speak on behalf of the widows. But often a few of these scribes would seize the widow's estate, so that money that is being cast into the temple treasury is not the scribe's money. It's the profits the scribe made from selling the widow's estate. And among the prophets, the Old Testament prophets, those who were said to be devouring a widow's house were considered only worthy of one thing, all the time, consistent with all the prophets: wrath and judgment, not commendation. They're giving sums of money that they won't possibly miss, because it doesn't take away from their vacations, it doesn't take away from their grocery bills, it doesn't take away from the lifestyle they already have. They still wear the long robe. which you had to be pretty wealthy to wear a long robe. Nearly everyone wore a short robe, but to wear a long robe all day, I tell you what, that's like Paris Hilton. Not having a care in the world. Or the Kardashians, not having a worry in the world. There's nothing that was really given up, even when they gave it up into the temple treasury. There wasn't a single luxury that was sold for this. There wasn't any ambition sacrificed, but there was greed exposed. There are those in all of our communities who give greatly, but never actually give. Jesus is not an accountant here, because bookkeepers are screaming, wait a minute here, whoa, what is going on with this passage? How can a penny be worth more than the tens of thousands of denarii that's being plummeted into the temple treasury? But Jesus doesn't seem to be that impressed with the show and go. He notices something that no accountant is probably even going to credit to a single person. A poor widow's 2 cents. Jesus notices those 2 coins. They probably barely rang in the chest. But Jesus is there. Because for it represented everything of value that this widow did have in life. Not what she had left over or what she could spare. Everything. Now, I've already spoke that ministers get way too carried away with this passage being, give as much as you can. And we should give in some way something to our present day temples of faith as devotedly as this widow did. And Jesus does commend this widow for her act of faith. She is relying on God now until the next day for her needs. But he also is condemning those who have benefited from this injustice in the first place, of this economic system that is creating poor widows in the first place. We see it all the time, probably late night television. Ministers who need more for their ministries out. And unfortunately, we've heard the stories of someone giving all they had to someone who has an air-conditioned doghouse. No widow, anywhere should have to give their last coins to an agency. If giving was about justice here instead of charity, there would be the recognition that we have a responsibility to those who have more than enough to lift up the have-nots, to at least have some. Then we all can actually thrive. It is a well-known philanthropic fact that those who have suffered considerable hardship in their lives actually give a greater percentage of their income to those in need than those who never suffered a setback. Now, wealthy people do give a larger sum, but it is actually a smaller percentage of their total income. Not unlike the long-robed and the long-praying scribes in our story. Derek Pinwell speaks about this. Perhaps Jesus' scorn in the story of the widow's mite is aimed not just at the fact that the wealthy contribute relatively little as a percentage of what they own compared to the poor, who contribute an extraordinarily higher percentage relative to what they actually do own, but that the wealthy and the powerful help to continue the system that leaves the poor and powerless feeling like they have to surrender every last cent in order to even participate in life. Making those at the bottom feel less than even human, so that they'll cough up more to keep those at the top from having to sacrifice more, is an abomination, plain and simple, to Jesus. In my own experience, in economic challenged Cloakey Park, I know that my so-called generosity has often been challenged by the actions and contributions of others who did not necessarily or really have anything to give, yet they gave. And simply because of the fact that they have been there before, they give more than what I believe someone might actually deserve. The long robes that the scribes wore will eventually get a stain on them, will eventually wear out. Those respectful greetings in all the marketplaces will eventually be shared with someone a little better than you. And the best seats in a synagogue or a church, or at the biggest social events of the year, will likely have invitations written to someone else soon. These are not the greatest gifts in the world. They are worth giving up the striving for. Some actions are worth doing well. Some actions cause us to reprioritize, to reassess the true depth of our often spoken commitments. So we ask ourselves that, do we commit our time, talents, and treasures to the calling to fully participate in God's joyous work of lifting the widows in our lives and the lowly, and scattering the proud? Do we strive for justice in such a way that those who should not feel obligated to give find those who seek to correct the imbalance between have and have not? The greatest gift that we can give to anyone else likely does not involve a dollar sign with several zeros after it. The greatest gift we can possibly give to anyone else is our love of God, expressed in multiple versions of time, talents, treasure, freely shared with others. For God gives to us that we may give to others. And its value can never be quantified nor measured. But it does demand a response. Is your response without any cost whatsoever? Or is it with your very life? Amen.